This chapter held more than I ever expected. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, here we are to do a breakdown and review of Chapter 7 of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, which is known as The Robbed. And ladies and gentlemen, I personally have always been a fan of Gege's writing. I know that's a very controversial statement, especially with the end of the Jujutsu Kaisen manga, and I still do have my many critiques at the end of the manga, even if I have softened on it with time, as ultimately, your boy can never stay negative towards something forever. With very rare exception. Like, I can't say fully that, but still, it's rare for your boy to stay super duper negative. But I have been a fan of Gege's writing. But dare I say, this one chapter alone was a Gege masterclass. Like one never seen. And realistically, I should have been able to tell by this cover page alone, Yuji Iwasaka sensei snapped. But of course, if you want to see my live reactions to this chapter for as low as $1 a month, or you can become a member for as low as $3 a month, a link to my Patreon will be in the description down below. You can check out the 33, yes, 30, it was not meant to be that long, but this chapter is just that good. I'm not sure how long the review is going to be, because we have for a little bit, but 33-minute live reaction to this great chapter. Link in the description will be down below, or you can just join the channel, $3 a month. You get access to all early videos, and you get access to all live reactions I do. Such a live reaction for this chapter, but let's not waste any more time. We got a whole lot to talk about. So let's hop right into first the color cover page of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, and why I think this is so good. Number one, with the context of this chapter, and very specifically what we know of this character's fate thanks to the context of this chapter, I think it is very important that these two are portrayed in a fading orange. And you'd be like, what on earth does that matter? The fading orange is a sign of the setting sun, right? Because ultimately, one of these characters has been given a deadline. Characters has been given a set sun. And notably, the other character who has not been given a set sun has already had their sun set in one way. Not in the same literal way as this one, but this character has lost something. So just on a symbolic level, the orange works really, really well. I wish I could say something directional, like rises in the east, sets in the west, but the lighting is on both sides, even though Cross's face is more highlighted clearly towards the left, aka the west. Sun rises in the east and sets in the west. He is looking upon the setting sun, and even the wind is blowing that way, as he's already watched the sunset, while he's technically also watching a second setting sun in Yuka. And note how Yuka is bathed evenly in the light, and unlike Cross, it's coming directly at her, as if the sun is setting upon her, because she can no longer be free thanks to certain stipulations that are beyond her control. So just in terms of the thematics of the chapter, now looking back on this color cover page, Yuji Iwasaka cooked on that level. But artistically, once again, Yuji Iwasaka is a monster. Are they a monster to the same caliber as a Kohei Horikoshi? No, that man's even more monstrous. Murata? No, that man's even more monstrous. But like, right now, right this instant, hold on. Butchie's a monster too. We won't talk about like literally these two. We're not gonna talk about these two. These two are animals. These are animals. But in terms of the other weekly manga dropping, dare I say, I love Ichi the Witch though, but it may just be it's either on par with Ichi the Witch or better. Tatsu Sensei. Tatsu Sensei is a monster among monsters too. So I think Tatsu Sensei is still better. Clear Suzuki Sensei, not close. Clear Hokusada Sensei, not close. Ruri Dragon, I don't know which sensei this is. I do read it occasionally, but regardless, dare I say, just because of the stylization of it, clears even Miura Sensei, and definitely, as much as I love clears Mitarashi Sensei. And what else am I missing, man? Like it's just smacking up the competition. I haven't fully caught up yet. I am reading Ultimate Exorcist Kyoshi, for anyone who's wondering. So maybe, because I'm thinking things looking like they're winding down. So that's bad of joy. But Usui Sensei, like it just, Yuji Iwasaka Sensei is just a monster artistically. They clear drastically. And of course, dare I say, they even clear Gege themselves in terms of it. And I'd say it's just because of the sheer variance, man. From the usage of the light and its imagery, to the soft fades, to the different levels of shading built in. Clearly the color shading and the traditional black and white shading, the way the different textures are shown, from the different texture of the hair to the different texture of the clothing, to even just the way how skillful these characters are drawn, the details in the eye, like they're just cracked. Like I may have to do a full proper breakdown of of Yuji Iwasaka's art style and compare it directly to Gege's, because I don't want to spend too much time here, because there's already a whole lot in this chapter that I have to talk about in terms of just Gege going Themes.txt and throwing the chapter at us, and also just, man, the character work in the chapter is immaculate too. But in that case, let's not waste more time. Let's hop right into Chapter 7, The Robbed. So, we open up with things that are definitely related to this chapter, but things that kind of blew my mind separately. Let's talk with Taka for a little second.
Yes, the sorcerers and I will be playing a little game of hide and seek for a while.
So, this is revealed that Takada, after the end of last chapter, did actually manage to escape. I thought he was knocked out. I thought he was kind of finished and cooked when Maru ended up punching Tsurugi and Takada through the ice pillar. I thought that man was done. But no, he did actually manage to escape and was wandering off. So he was going to simply continue what he was planning to do already. He was going to go back to being a first grader and just being aware, like, darn, man. But with that being the case, we see that he didn't actually manage to get too far, as someone tells him, don't move. And we see that Takada's like,
oh no, I've been a naughty, naughty little boy. Are you gonna tell the teacher on me? Maybe discipline me with your big, strong, adult man hand.
Okay, I'm stopping. And I don't know. Maybe I just have a problem. Alright? Maybe I just have a problem. But now it's weird. Not like I'll admit it was already very weird that he was infiltrating classrooms, slaughtering people, and consistently living over to the first grade for presumably like what, 50-ish years? But it's like, I don't know, something about this thing feels extra weird. He's sticking his tongue out, you're gonna tell the teacher on me, he's still dressed like a school, it's just a little bit strange. But of course, while he's trying to get down freaky and deaky, talking about punishment as he threads his needle, let's say, we get a statement. A Kamal statement.
I'm gonna say it one more time. Don't move.
Let me just hit it for the one time.
A cursed seal with snake eyes and fangs. It's cursed.
And he gets dropped right across the neck. But Usami is a cursed speech user. Now, I do happen to have just a few questions. His name is Usami. I mean, like, maybe it's just different, though. Because the last and only cursed speech user that we knew that didn't copy it from somewhere else was Inumaki. So initially, my immediate thought was, oh, Inumaki laid pipe. But, like, unless he didn't want to give his child and then his grandchildren... I mean, like, hold on, let me think. How can this work? Maybe it could work. Because this is like 2 generations later. Maybe Inumaki laid pipe very, very quickly, right? Because let me rub my little brain together and think how this could work. Inumaki could have laid pipe, had a kid. That kid was a daughter. Usami could have laid pipe, had a kid. That kid was your man. They could have gotten together. Boom. Produced Usami. This Usami that we have now. And he inherited cursed speech from the maternal side. So it actually does work. Fun fact, the live reaction was like, I have no idea how this works. But now I can see it. Because it's been 68 years. Multiple generations could have passed. Inumaki could have laid pipe real quick. He could just walked up to somebody and been like, drop it. And then boom. Okay, I'm kidding. But a cursed speech user. Number 2, it's interesting that he uses cursed speech in this way. We know that Inumaki simply wasn't even allowed to speak. He was reduced to a literal gag character who did nothing but occasionally aura farm because the snake eyes and fangs were built into his mouth. But it seems like that may be a unique thing, as obviously I don't think Usami is a user of copy or anything. I think this is just his technique. But instead of it being built into his mouth, it's built onto his hand. You see, he literally does unwrap his hand. And that almost makes you want to go back and look at something. And I think I will. Hold on a second. Okay, I can't see it here. Let me go back to chapter 3 then. Does he have a wrap around his hands? Not there. Let's go back to... Hold on, sorry. I actually do want to see if he's always had this wrap here, if it's just a new detail. It looks like his hands are exposed. Oh, well, he may have gloves on, though. I see the segmentation here, so he may have gloves on. Let me see. Because he does it with which hand? Is it his left or his right? I can't tell. But let me see. Usami. Yeah. Okay, so he's wearing gloves. So he does have the seal. He had the seal covered up for the entire time. So his is built into his hand. So that's actually a very interesting thing. I do wonder if that like is counterintuitive though, because obviously as you can hear when I try to talk to my hand, like it comes out muffled. So like maybe it is a less effective version of cursed speech than if it was just built into the mouth. But it does still allow for utilization of cursed speech that allows him to speak normally, and presumably is very much more efficient on cursed energy as he's funneling it through something. I'm shocked he can't like do this maybe to like at least somewhat amplify it. No, he has to completely cover his mouth with the hands, and the snake eyes and fangs allow him to channel cursed speech. But notably, this cursed speech is not enough alone, as we see he does just freeze him, immediately punch him across the mouth, seemingly get blood on his glove from absolutely violating Takada here and dropping a foot in his face. And Takada's done. So, Takada does manage to escape. Is this Usami upscale? I wouldn't say so. Takada's really, really weak at this point. Like, he did just fight Maru and get absolutely bullied by him. But on top of that, still, Usami being a powerful grade 1 sorcerer does just make sense with what he's been established to be so far. Both Yuka and Tsurugi have been shown to rely on him, and they actually do have faith in his abilities. So it's cool to see that we do, in fact, have a cursed speech user in the modern day. And also, it's different from how it was previously used, and he's a character who's facilitating connection. So, isn't that interesting? A character whose whole cursed technique is based around communication is the current, as we see on this next page, well, not on this next page, let me go a little bit further, acting minister Usami. He, a guy who has an entire curse technique based around communication, is the one facilitating communication between the humans and the Samurians. Isn't that interesting? And note how it's curse speech, right? Not just regular speech, because they both are steeped in the world of Jujutsu. Even though the Samurians refer to it as something different, they truly are having contact and communication, aka real curse speech. I like that. I like the interplay. Very intentional move by Gege. I think it's neat. But with it being the case, we see that after knocking him, Usami does immediately seem to re-equip his glove and say, Mino, take care of the rest. And Mino's like, ooh, scary. All right, boss, whatever you say. I don't want you to curse speech me. I cannot have my cheeks jiggling like that. But we see, back at the school, Cross is, let's just say a little bit, just a tiny bit annoyed. And he says, get up! What the heck did you just say? And Tsurugi naturally is like, I thought I wasn't supposed to talk to you, huh? Which, buddy, but like, I get it. He's manhandling you by your collar right now, bro. But he did just save your life. And he did just stop Maru, which is what your whole goal was. Like, I'd be at least a little bit appreciative. I'd answer his questions. But, you know, Tsurugi, he's just a teeny tiny bit hot-headed, so he talks a little bit spooky. And we see that Cross is not playing any games. He's like, answer me! Why did you say the word neighbors? And naturally, Tsurugi's like, Gangaruni, he used it first. That's what you guys call it, right? Maru said it's a friend who understands Maru said, it's a friend who understands why the things that matter are so important to you. And that is true. We do know that Maru is very particular, focused on connection, in a way that, like, I think Cross very subconsciously is. And I think that subconscious desire to connect and bond is shown throughout this chapter, and then very much heavily highlighted by the end of it. So I do like that we open up playing with this idea that Cross is still very, very conflicted. And like, he was brought in on instinct based on hearing Maru mention the word, but it's still, like, he wants to make sure, right? He's still very, very unsure about humans and their coexisting dynamic with the Samurians, which does once again make sense. It will truly depend on what the tragedy was. And I'll talk more about what the tragedy could have been later on once we get another mention of the tragedy that led to the Samurians being refugees from their home planet. But we see that Cross is admittedly not very happy with his big breasts, as he says, darn, Maru in his big mouth. But obviously Cross is talking just a little itty bitty tiny bit spooky. He says, you think we can be neighbors? You do know this country's history, don't you? You've been living peacefully on a path laid out for you by a superpower ever since the war. What could you humans possibly understand about us? You don't have to constantly think about protecting your own lives. You humans have everything you need to be human from the moment you're born. I'm sure you look down on us refugees as being dangerous, filthy, and poor. Things have gotten especially bad ever since the Kyoto Paranormal Security Treaty established superiority among the international community. Even if you wanted to be neighbors, we would refuse. Now, naturally, Tsurugi didn't really hear much of any of this. He did seemingly knock out well before that. But I'm gonna get a little, just a little itty bit bold. A little itty bit bold. Now, if I'm making a leap, if I'm feeling a little bit too froggy and jumping a bit too high, let a brother know. But, let me, come here real close. Let me tell you what I think of the Samurians. are a hefty, clear, and actually very topical allegory for. Come here, come here, come here. Getting close, getting close, getting close. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice and close, nice and close. Immigration. I know it's a big, scary word. I know it's a big 1, 2, 3, 4, 6? No. 4. Big 11-letter word, right? Immigration. It has 11 letters, right? IMMIGRATION. Yeah, a big 11-letter word. I know it's very, very scary. But I think this is Gang Akutami, in fact, reaching into their common little Toby Fox-esque bag by making it very clear and heavy-handed. There are certain things here that very clearly play into the whole idea of immigration, not just as something that happens, but very specifically the many conflicts around it. Obviously, the Sumerians are the immigrants in this case. I don't think that's too crazy to say. They are people, refugees from another land who are now being forced to conform to a new one because they lost their original home and now have no choice but to work with others. And of course, there are the different levels to it. You don't have to constantly think about protecting your own lives. Obviously, the Sumerians are very worried about that because there are only 50,000 of them. There are literally billions of humans. That is a very large difference, even if 50,000 seems like a lot to us as an individual. You humans have everything you need to be human from the moment you're born. Now, admittedly, this confused me at first. I was like, Gangaroni, what do you mean you're not Sumerian the second you're born? But I think, ultimately, what he means here is that there's no need to prove yourself as human. There are many cases, unfortunately, in our real world where just because a person looks slightly different or doesn't sound the right way or has a slightly different background than you, that they suddenly need to prove themselves human. Whether it be with paperwork, whether it be by changing who they are, one way or another. It's really hard for a lot of people to fathom that people of different backgrounds, cultures, languages, and ethnicity, all of that are still, at the end of the day, human. We are one species. There's not a difference. Race is a social construct. I have no idea how to hammer this in, but it's real true. But, of course, because of that, there are many cases where people have to prove they're human. But of course, since the Sumerians are the allegory for immigrants and just people of different backgrounds, in this case, they quote-unquote need to prove they're human. Or at least human enough to coexist with. They're essentially walking on eggshells. Which is once again very interesting, as they do have Dabura, but clearly Dabura and his power is not the key, at least not the one that Dabura himself wants to use. And we see, though, once again, continuing the idea of refugees and immigration and the parallels, I'm sure you look down on refugees like us as being dangerous, filthy, and poor. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched a little movie called The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but yeah, that's very heavily applied here. And once again, unfortunately, a very common belief. That, because someone else wasn't lucky enough to be born in the exact place I was, they are now lesser. They are now dangerous. They are filthy, even though they just have a different culture. And are not just exactly like you, and didn't happen to spawn in the same spot as you did. So once again, heavily feeding into the allegory. And notably, sorry, I thought I saw a bug, but notably, things have gotten especially bad since the Kyoto Paranormal Security Treaty established superiority among the international community. AKA, this is a reference to when one certain nation becomes a superpower, and then that superpower has fundamental control over basically everybody else, meaning everybody else has to shuck and jive in accordance to that superpower. And thusly, any sort of preconceived biases or notions that that new or old superpower has, guess what? They can now push whatever agenda that they want and make the lives of certain types of people very, very difficult, such as refugees and or immigrants. Once again, this is Immigration.txt. This is Themes.txt. Gege must have played the Undertale recently and said, man, forget the subtlety. Boom! But honestly, there's a reason I call it quite topical. Because if you look around the entire world, there is definitely, for some reason, a mass fear of other human beings. I don't get it, personally. I think all humans are neat. I think the fact that we are different is the most beautiful thing about us. I think everything would be boring if we were all the same. I don't get it. It should be cool that people are different. And notably, even when people aren't different and look mostly the same and sound mostly the same, for one reason or another, there will always be a reason to other. I don't like the way their nose looks. Their hair's too long. Trust me. Despite everyone having full bodily autonomy over themselves, there are people who are real mad about what you do with your body. Even though. They don't live in it. Trust me, it's a real hard, real deep, real dangerous. And notably, Cross's entire idea, even if you wanted to be neighbors, we would refuse, is also a way that many people from different places feel, even when they move to a new place. They don't want to give up their culture. They don't want to give up their individuality. They don't want to bow and kowtow and bend to the whims of wherever they are now. They want to still be themselves. They want to be independent. And in many cases, they will sort of resort to violence, especially if there's already violence being perpetrated against them. Now, has there been any violence perpetrated against the Cimmerians just yet? Not that we know of, at least not by man. But as we will find out later, something man-made, quote-unquote, is definitely responsible for the Cimmerians' current situation. What that man-made thing is, though, we'll theorize that and talk about it in a little bit. But that being the case, a little time passes, and we see Maru and Tsurugi basically getting loaded up for transport. We see that Tsurugi ends up in the back of an ambulance, and Maru will end up somewhere else. But we see that Usami and Cross do meet up, and naturally, Usami says, "Dispatch Officer Cross," and Cross says, "Acting Minister Usami, I'd like to take the Special Envoy Maru back to our mothership for treatment. Is that alright with you?" Immediately, Cross is trying to get his big breasts up out of there. And naturally, they probably do have the facilities to treat him on Earth. And notably, we will not see Maru again from this page on for the rest of the chapter. He doesn't even get mentioned, I'm pretty sure. I mean, obviously, Cross will go on to pretend to be Maru, but Maru himself does not appear. So it does genuinely make me wonder, how effective the Cimmerians are with, RCT and stuff like that. But obviously, it is very clear instance of the Cimmerians sort of not really trusting the humans. And obviously, I do get why. Even without Cross's bias, I also would be worried about leaving the completely unable to protect himself and physically damaged Cimmerian with the humans, who are very clearly desperate to know as much about the Cimmerians as possible. Remember, one of the biggest missions that Usami had given Tsurugi specifically was to bond with Maru and get as much Cimmerian information as possible. Leaving the humans with unfettered access to an unconscious Cimmerian, especially one as unique as Maru and seemingly high up in the ranking as a special envoy, yeah, probably not the best idea. And naturally, we know that this would clearly harm Cimmerian relations, or at least that's what Usami thinks as he thinks to himself, "I don't want the Cimmerians to see Maru injured. If he doesn't require any treatment that only the Cimmerians can provide, I'd like to keep him here. We'll do everything we can for him." That does make me wonder how common or uncommon RCT still is. We know by the modern era, there were only users of it on other people were Shoko and Yuta, I'm pretty sure, and technically Rika by extension of Yuta. And even in the past, I think the only confirmed external user of RCT is Sukuna himself, ironically enough. Many of the other top-tier previous era sorcerers don't even have RCT for themselves. So it's very likely that RCT is actually still super-duper rare on either side. There are only 50,000 Cimmerians. How many of them are actually proficient in Cursed Energy is unknown as well. So I do wonder how prominent RCT is. With seeing Cursed Speech again, anything could be possible, though. But we see that Cross immediately denies and saying, "No, we'll be treating him ourselves." And obviously, Usami immediately leaps to the idea of, "Darn it, do you think we want to collect biological information from the Cimmerians through him?" And, well, obviously, I didn't think of that immediately. That's probably what immediately was on Cross's mind. And one other thing he would like to do that obviously couldn't be done if Maru was being treated on Earth. And we see as they are risen back up to the mothership that Cross makes a very specific decision. He looks down on Maru with all three of his eyes. And notably, this eye does look colored strangely compared to the other two, but I think just because its outline is lesser and its pupil's not colored in. But we see that the obvious, the patch that covers Maru's third eye is peeled off from him. And then Cross proceeds to let his hair down and says, "I'm going to borrow this for a bit." As he's taking the opportunity to be Maru, essentially, to understand human culture directly, and clearly not get it through what I presume is a biased lens of whatever Maru is technically reporting. And we see Mahito. It's just like we don't see his eyes, but that's Mahito. And Mahito's is back. First Cursed Speech, then Mahito's. I was expecting to see Yuji at the end of the chapter, because darn. Speaking of darn, we hear Mahito say, "Darn. So it's not him after all." Now, this is a good, juicy, meaty question. I think ultimately what Mahito means here is that if I'm to understand his consistent, unchanging nature as a curse, is looking for a catalyst to start the war between Samurians and humans. Because we know Mahito is a curse. He relies and thrives off of the idea of interhuman conflict. And obviously the Samurians are not biologically human, but they are human enough that I wouldn't be shocked if any sort of conflict between them would start fear and ramp up whatever fear that does exist between the two factions, thus making Mahito all the stronger. Obviously, it's not exactly like the D system in Chainsaw Man, where ultimately, the more feared something is, the stronger it gets. But clearly, we do know that Mahito would very likely get a buff, or at least appreciate constant, consistent conflict. So when he says it's not him after all, he presumably figured that either Maru or even Cross would end up as the cores of this conflict and start it, essentially allowing him to get stronger. Now, this does raise the question, is Mahito himself properly incarnated here? He's shown in upside down space with no eyes in a void, seemingly enough. So, maybe he hasn't fully incarnated yet, but if he hasn't, this would essentially be the same liminal space we saw him at the end of JJK. Or the same liminal space we saw him in at the end of JJK. When Sukuna was passing on into the next life, quote unquote, he saw Mahito there in this same dark, black, pre-soul, post-soul void. So whether or not Mahito is actually back, or this is him trying to come back, I don't know. And obviously, Mahito being here does hypothetically build into a certain idea. Maybe. It really depends on whether or not he's physically back or not, and how much influence he really has, and how much influence cursed energy has throughout the cosmos. But we see that Tsurugi wakes up. And notably, I don't think this is because of the interaction with Mahito. I feel like this is once again another time transition piece. Kind of like how this blank panel right here is a time transition piece. This panel right here for Mahito is a transition piece, and Tsurugi snaps awake. And we see that Maru's here, right? As he says, "Tsurugi, are you okay?" And naturally, Tsurugi is very worried for her sister, as she did seemingly get very, very tired, very, very randomly. I wonder what happened to her. But we see he asks, "How's Yuka?" And Maru says, "She's getting checked out, but she seems fine. I heard Cross was here." And Tsurugi naturally goes, "Oh, yeah. Is he always like that?" And naturally, Cross, immediately understanding the insinuation there, is like, "Always like what?" And Tsurugi says, "Always so mad." And naturally, Cross is like, no, he's not. Which, I get why Cross is like that, though. Notably, I was about to say, it's not good or happy or healthy to be angry all the time. But, even without having full context, just taking a wild guess at what happened to the Samurians, I get why Cross is the way he is and why he's so paranoid. I would be too. And this is without any of the allegory stuff, just what we know of. I get it. But even Tsurugi admits, but I guess he's got a reason to be, which is natural, right? Losing your entire home planet, having to rely on a different planet, that different planet having many biases towards you, at least implied biases, yeah, not fun. But with that being the case, we see that Tsurugi admits, "Maru, I'm really sorry I accused you of plotting and barging into someone else's turf. I was being closed-minded. I'm sure you guys have your reasons." And I do like that, right? The idea that Tsurugi not only realizes that he's wrong, but especially at this point, where I don't think he knows this is Cross, right? Notably, Yuka will go on to mention that. He probably knows, but he doesn't want to be wrong. I think at this point, he's very specifically, and probably even based a bit off of his previous interaction with Cross here, if he was at all conscious for the back end of it, he very specifically is so focused on the idea of, yeah, dude, I was biased. I was wrong. I made the mistake. I want to correct it. And ultimately, he's worried for Maru, right? As he says, "You used your curse technique, though, and you got hurt. Did you get punished?" As naturally, he knows that the whole Sumerian humans dynamic thing is a little bit rough, and knowing that Maru did get damaged on Earthen territory while a special envoy, when he wasn't supposed to fight, and not supposed to use his curse technique, yeah, pretty bad. But we see that Maru, or who we know as Cross, says, "Not yet." Now, how true that is back on the actual mothership, I don't know. But we see that Tsurugi says, "I'm anxious." Because obviously, this is still worrying, right? He now genuinely does view Maru as a friend, and even was willing to risk his life for him. So obviously, he doesn't want any retribution to come to him simply for the fact that Tsurugi was too weak. We do know weakness and inability is a big defining part of Tsurugi as a character, and even Yuka as well. And speaking of Yuka, she shall appear. She says, "Well, if it isn't the MVP." And naturally, in a very Maru-esque moment, this really does look like a flat-out Maru drawing. Maru or Cross goes, Yuka! Or, that's not Yuka! And Yuka says, I heard you were really amazing back there. I was asleep though, so I didn't see it, which is very unfortunate. But she presumably also was generally healed off screen. As remember, she did get 2 holes stabbed in her body. But we see that Tsurugi says, he could pass for a grade 1 sorcerer, easy. Now, it'd be like, only grade 1? But I need y'all to remember, special grade level and actual special grade sorcerer are 2 different things. I don't think what Maru showed could actually solo a country either. So I get why they say grade 1 sorcerer, as it is technically the peak of the universe for, like, normal people who can't annihilate entire countries eventually. But we see that Yuka says, for real? You little show-off. So, what should we do? It's today, right? And Tsurugi says, yeah, I can move just fine, but what'd the doctor say? Can't believe you ran out of stamina so fast. Now, this once again does imply that Tsurugi doesn't actually know what's happening to his sister, which... Oh, it's rough. Oh, it's rough. And once again, I do hope that Tsurugi isn't somehow, like, spiritually, jujutsually words at fault. Because I feel like he'd feel extremely guilty about that. And I feel extremely guilty too. We'll get to what that could mean, though, in a second. I keep delaying things like, don't worry, we're going to get to it eventually. And I promise we will. But we see that Cross is actually confused on what on earth they're talking about. In fact, hold on, let me see something. Did Cross alter his tattoos? No, I think... Cross didn't even... Wait a second. He really just assumed they just didn't know. He's like, there's no way they paid this much attention. Because he doesn't even alter his tattoos. He's like, you can say the same. Right? Right? Yeah, it's because he has the spike, and then he doesn't have the straight round ones that Maru does. Even his lines beneath his eyes seem somewhat different. So, like, he really expected him to be super gullible and not actually pay too much attention to Maru's actual face. But clearly, this is Cross. And we see that Yuka quickly plays it off as Cross is confused for where they're going, what they're talking about. Yuka says, I'm fine. I was just a little off my game. That's all. And she winks and plays it completely off. Oh, if only that were true. And we see that Tsurugi says, all right, well, let's go. I want to assume that maybe Tsurugi's not giga dense, but at the same time, who knows? Like, I could genuinely see her hiding what the truth is from him. And we see naturally Cross ask, go where? And they both look and are like, huh? The place you've been begging us to go to, Maru. Now, I don't remember this, and I reread the chapters, and I did not see Maru begging to go to an amusement park, but, I maybe need to do another, because I did a super quick reread. I'm not sure if I missed it. But with that being the case, we see that they do pull up to an amusement park. And notably, Yuka, at least, is having a very good time. She's smiling on the merry-go-round, she's smiling on the roller coaster, she's smiling at the popcorn stand. Or the food stand in general. Note how Yuka is very, very, very much enjoying life. I mean, like, I also do the same thing. I love roller coasters, so, like, I do get it. I haven't ridden a merry-go-round in years, though. I'm very, very large. I don't fit on most merry-go-rounds. I mean, I could fit, but it just looks very, very awkward. So I don't typically do it. But Yuka's having a good time. A real good time. Unless she doesn't have too much time. Meanwhile, Tsurugi, both on the roller coaster and even when the fun glasses on, is like... And is flat face. Very much, mewing at all times. You gotta... If you ever stop mewing, your face could explode. You know that? And that's why you always gotta attempt the mog. But with it being the case, we see that even as Cross nibbles on some popcorn, whether or not he's enjoying it, I'm not sure, but he's nibbling on it. He says, darn you, Maru. You never put this on your schedule. Which does make me wonder if this whole thing was a setup, because I missed it. But then again, Maru may have actually just asked, and I just don't remember. But we see that Yuka says, it's just not enough, And Tsurugi says, I want something faster. Which, I do understand. There's something oddly euphoric about going at, like, top speed with minimal protection. Like, obviously, like, you can go, like, what's the fastest I've ever gone in a car? I think, like, 100 something. It had to be 100 something, which is faster than most roller coasters. But, in a car, like, you got the windshield, you got the car itself, you're on the open road. Like, it's different. It's different. Meanwhile, on a coaster, you're like, most of your body's exposed to the open air. It just hits different, There's the loops, it's crazy. Like, I do love it. And I do understand their want to go faster, go bigger, go stronger, go greater. But we see that Mino admits, somebody's going to end up dead if they try to keep up with you two. And of course, as Cross is munching away, he notices that the balloon leaves the child's hand. And he immediately reacts and catches it. And notably, the child doesn't even thank Maru. Just grabs the balloon back and is like, where's mommy? Which... Admittedly, I was going to get on the Buddy's case a little bit about this, but then again, I've also just slipped away from my parents, even when commanded not to. There's very one specific time I remember with my own father where he's like, "Do not leave my side, child." And I was like, "Of course, father." I left his side, and then he almost left me at the store. Like that taught me a lesson that day. To this day, if I'm ever traveling with my father and he has the keys, I don't leave his side. Not for the fact that I couldn't find a way back one way or another. I have multiple ways to get around. But I just, like, that taught me a lesson at a very, very young age. Oh, this man will leave me. And thusly, I never left this side again. But also, specifically at an amusement park, there was a time where my mother was holding my hand. And then the park opened up. And everybody crowded in and stampeded in. And of course, little, like, 3-4-year-old Pencil did not have a strong enough grip strength to overwhelm an entire crowd of, like, mixed, full-grown adults and stuff like that. So, yeah, I was lost for, like, a little bit. But then they pretty much found me immediately as I kind of just wandered off to the side. Very, very confused and also looking for my mother. But with it being the case, the child asked, "Where's mommy?" And all three both looked like, "Where's mommy?" This is completely throughout their day. But we see that Yuka says, "Oh, great, the cliche lost child. We probably shouldn't move him from this spot. Tsurugi, your face is too scary, so stop by the lost kid desk and then disappear." Which, it's crazy to say to her own brother, but, like, I get it. I also, like, notably, I'd say I'm relatively decent with kids, but that's because of my experience of having a really large family, and that's, like, getting used to all different types of kids. But, like, I've mentioned this many times before, my resting face is not pleasant. Like, I know some people who have a resting face that's, like, they're, like, just consistently smiling. If I'm not focused on actively smiling, my face looks like this. I just look very, very mean and or angry, and I promise I'm not. I just look that way. The amount of people that have asked me, like, "Yo, Pencil Man, you good?" Yes, I'm fine. I'm just not thinking. I'm just not active. So as those two run off, I understand what Yuka means. I'm like, that's pretty bad. Leave. It still hurts. And Mino and Tsurugi run off. Very specifically, Mino running in this way. I do love Mino. It's a very silly character. And we see that Yuka says, "Your mom will come back soon if we wait here." And the kid immediately breaks down in tears as he was left behind. But notably, they are quiet tears. And she says, "Guess that won't work." And then Cross is like, "Don't cry. What's there to cry about? It's like your mom's dead. Be quiet and sit still." Which, he right, but he wrong though. Like legally speaking, he right. Like he will be reunited with his mother. Why is he crying? But at the same time, that does make me wonder about, like, Samurian. Like, I do wonder how long they've been refugees. Like, how long have they been traveling through the stars? Because, like, does Maru not remember being a child? Was Maru, or in this case, does Cross never remember being a child? Like, I'm not sure how old. Like, if Maru's 19 and they're twin siblings, that means that Cross should also be 19 in terms of Earth years. So I do wonder, relatively speaking, if he just never had an experience like this. Like, notably, even when I was younger, I would understand when kids just burst out into tears related to their parents not being there, because, like, hey, they don't have object permanence. If they do, it's very recently developed. So I wouldn't say this to a child. So it does feel rather, like, unsocialized for a character who seems to be as widely socialized and capable of communication as Cross here. And we see naturally at the simple idea of his mother's death, not only is the child horrified, even Yuka's like, "Dude, really?" And as the child screams out with tears, Yuka's like, "Are you for real right now?" And naturally, Cross must have some experience with children, because he knows the key to getting all children to stop crying, and immediately hits a backflip. But, of course, I'm not saying I could immediately hit a backflip when the children cried. I would snap my neck. But he does hit the backflip, completely shocks the child. Not only lands the backflip smooth, buttery, and delicioso, but he also catches the popcorn, too. He doesn't let the popcorn hit the ground. And then lands. And we see he gets massive amounts of praise, and they ask, "What was that? Does he work here?" And naturally, Yuka's like, "Hey, just not just for thee, also for me." And she needs to go, "Hoof!" and manages to land her backflip as well. And says, "I can do that too, so don't get cocky." And we see naturally Cross is like, "What's her problem?" And now, notably, two things here. This technically also does kind of feed into the allegory, where people of different backgrounds and histories are just considered as entertainment for other normal people, aka the Sumerians being the outcasts/immigrants here, and the humans looking on as if he was just entertainment. I mean, asking, does he work here? But there's also Yuka's side of things, where I do understand just being competitive. Like, notably, you've heard how much I've talked about fighting games before. Y'all know I still do have my many little competitive streaks that pop up here and there. I just love it. It is a part of me, and I do understand Yuka's desire to be competitive. Do I say this builds into, like, her whole limited time scenario that we find out later on in the chapter? No, I think this is just a part of Yuka's personality, and I get that. I get that. Once again, I've always just been naturally competitive. I've always wanted smoke. Gosh darn it, I don't know why. I inherited it from my lineage, I guess. I don't know why, but I do love a good challenge, and I also do not like necessarily to be proven inferior. But there are many cases where I'll immediately concede inferiority. I know multiple people who can do backflips. I am not one of those people. But we see that the mother does appear, and she does reunite with her child. And notably, as thanks, the child does give Cross the balloon and says, "Thanks!" And we see that Yuka does place a call on her little ring phone thing and says, "Tsurugi? Yeah, the kid's mom came back." And naturally, Cross is very interested to see what's on the back of the balloon and says, "Halloween," which does prove that the submarines do have a bunch of information, including the very language, but they don't know all its intricacies and anything that could go along with that. And we see that Yuka says, "It's a holiday with..." Okay, this is the gamble. I don't want to get boomed. "It's a holiday with certain roots, but it was originally started by a different religion." Religion? Is that the religion Earthlings follow? Nah, I think it's around 20 to 30% of the world, though. And Japanese are kind of all over the place when it comes to religion. Basically, we follow... Oh, but you know what? I don't risk it. I mean, it's in the text. I'm gonna risk it because like this one section of the chapter is like so heavily based on it. I gotta talk about it. But it's a holiday with Christian roots, but it originally was started by a different religion. Christianity. Is this the religion Earthlings follow? No, I think it's around 20 to 30% of the world, though. That's true. Apparently, about 31.5% of the world is technically practicing Christians. I'm talking about right now. Let's talk about 68 years later. And we see that she admits the Japanese are kind of all over the place when it comes to religion. Basically, we follow Buddhism, Confucianism, and Shinto. But I guess we've also adopted more commercial holidays from other religions. And that is very true. If you think about, like, a lot of holidays from what they were to what they are now, it really is all kind of just, like... I don't mean to sound... See, this sounds bad. This is going to sound like... But pencil, that sounds so bad. And it does. But, like... A lot of holidays are kind of just ways to make money now. They're all very heavily commercialized. And don't get me wrong, I can't say I fully deny engaging with them. Like, I still do love the gift giving of Christmas, but like, look up what Christmas was. Unless I'm mistaken, it was not pleasant and did not involve gift giving. It was not. And once again, very much like Halloween, it wasn't. I don't think it wasn't. I mean, like, I think it. Well, technically, it did have to be, but I think it was like involved a pagan feast. If you know anything about pagan, like that's not a thing, or at least specifically in a certain context of Christianity. But that's the thing. Like Christianity is very like diverse, and it's many different belief systems and branches. But with that being the case, we see that naturally, with all these ideas of different religions and different beliefs, Cross naturally has a question. So you don't have a god you believe in? And we see that Yuka admits, not sure on that one, but I personally don't at least. What about you, Cross? And this does pretty much hardline confirm Yuka as atheistic. I would say she's agnostic, but like she will go later on in the chapter will not go into anything that would actually have her as agnostic. She just seems to be an atheist. But of course, you see she immediately goes, what about you, Cross? She doesn't even entertain the idea of Maru. And Cross actually turns like, I'm not Cross. I'm Maru. What do you mean you think I'm Cross? Is it because my hard-nosed personality? And the fact that I have different markings on my face, I didn't bother to check. But we see, as she says, it's totally obvious. Tsurugi might not have noticed yet, but even if he did, I doubt he'd say anything. Why not? Because he'd be mortified if he was wrong. He likes to be cool all the time. And then we cut back to Tsurugi and Mino being like, you don't like kids, Mino? That's surprising. And Mino says, I don't know the first thing to say to one. Which is unfortunate, but also very, very true. I feel like notably, there are like patterns you can follow with kids. Like I know, like I have like set routines I do whenever I take care of certain ones. But at the same time, it is a lot of freestyle. There's a lot of freestyle. You always got to be careful, right? Because ultimately, anything you say around a child will somehow end up in their vocabulary. One of my baby cousins has their favorite word being expeditiously. Specifically expeditiously, not expeditious, expeditiously. Why? Because I once said to them, "Hey, we need to get moving expeditiously." And they say, and I was like, expeditiously. Like, expeditiously. And we literally had like a whole 5-minute back and forth of me explaining to them how to say that. They were like 3 or 4 at the time. Like obviously they couldn't actually say expeditiously, but they really liked the word. And that's literally just because they heard me say it once. And now they just parrot it over and over and over again. Which is why I'm always careful about how I speak around children, because they will always listen. And they will always tell who told them that word. The amount of times I've gotten critiqued for having them say expeditiously, because now they just use it wrong. They're a little bit older now. Like they legitimately just use it wrong all the time. I expeditiously need to eat. That's not how you use that word. At least that's not like in the proper sentence or construct. But they use it because they just like the word. But we see that Maru admits, or Cross admits. Obviously, we aren't playing this Maru anymore. Cross admits we Sumerians do have a god. Which is interesting. He does classify all Sumerians, there are only 50,000 left apparently, but all 50,000 Sumerians believing in the same deity. And I don't think it's Dabura. Part of me want to be like, maybe they believe in their king as if he were a deity, but no, I think Dabura is different. I think they do just generally have a deity. It is interesting though, they only have the one. I do wonder if there were more Sumerian deities. And notably, this does seem like a monotheistic religion, not necessarily a polytheistic one where there are multiple gods, as he does say, a god. And naturally, Yuka asks, oh yeah? Then she, with the idea of monotheism being brought up, and then Mori talking about Christianity, she's like, have you heard the story about trampling on tablets before? And Cross says, no. And Yuka begins to explain, well, back in the day, Christianity was forbidden in Japan. To find out those who believed in it, they take these tablets depicting, I'm not saying that one, depicting, and tell people to trample on them. Anyone who refused to trample on the tablets was said to be Christian and executed. I just can't help but think though, if I were a Christian, why wouldn't I just step on the thing and then ask God for forgiveness afterwards? Because once you're dead, it's all over. Now, of course, we do have super extra reasons why she thinks about this, because limited timer. But also, it is a very interesting conundrum, right? And I suppose I offer the same question that she asked to Cross, and just to avoid, I suppose, that I asked you. Would you trample over the tablets to live? And if I do be executed, yeah. And you may be like, hey, pencil man, you gonna tell us your beliefs? And yeah, sure. The universe is way too orderly. Like math and like everything being able to be traced back to something is way too weird. If everything was more, like if things were at least 5 times as chaotic as they should be for the Googleplex of a chance for life to exist, I would be like way more convinced that maybe this is all random. But like math explains things too well. I know we made up math, but like you break down the universe enough and everything can be traced back to everything, we can trace back to everything. My only issue with the whole idea of everything being able to be traced back to everything, every single choice I've ever made, every single thing I've ever done, all my physical bodily functions being traced back to one specific thing, is that kind of like throws free will as a question into the thing. Because like if everything can be traced back to something, all the way back to the creation of the universe, isn't like free will like scientifically impossible? And like as a guy who loves science, that does like kind of conflict with my beliefs. But I also will admit I don't really to quote TF, not TF, but the Vegeta, I'm not a big fan of organized religion. I'm just not the hugest fan of it. I think it's very exploitative and it doesn't do the best. I know there are good cases of it, but there's so many bad cases of it as well. I was a big fan of organized, but I do actually believe in a deity. The same, it's complicated. It's a very long story, but I do feel like if we're going to go down this belief discussion, I should at least be somewhat forthwith of what my own beliefs are, and mainly just due to the order of the universe and the inexplicability of many aspects of the universe being so orderly, from all the way from the Big Bang itself to just like, I don't know, biochemical and realistically subatomical functions. I believe it. Something was created. Someone created something. How creative it is, other stories for other times. But with that being the case, I do understand Yuka's point, and I think it is a sort of thing that's true to life. And in fact, before I even get into Yuka's point about trampling over the tablets, let's go into what Cross mentions. I can respect the fact that other cultures and religions value certain things, but sometimes it's hard to truly empathize with why they feel that way, you know? And Cross is quiet at first, only to say, let's say it wasn't a tablet, but a living thing. If that tablet were alive, could you trample on it? And we see Yuka say, I see. Guess I never thought about it that way. And okay, but before I get into this next part, because once again this feeds back into like the immigration allegory, it is complicated. And I'll ask you a question. Would you trample over the tablets? If you are like me, who are pretty much immediately upon reading the story agreed with Yuka and been like, yeah, I would have trampled over the tablets and asked for forgiveness later if that mattered to me, or something like that. I then asked the question, would you If you say yes to the tablets because it's an inorganic thing, it's just an effigy. And notably, at least from my understanding, Christianity, you're not necessarily supposed to worship effigies or like images. Like that's kind of like the whole thing. Idolatry is a very bad thing, even if it is idolatry of the quote unquote correct deity. In the case of the living thing, would that change your mind? If it was a living being, would you trample over it? If your answer is still yes, then you just like me, for real, for real. But if your answer is no, I then have a question for that, on top of that question. Have you eaten something today? Like anything. Have you devoured a piece of food? Meat or veggies? Did you? In that case, you've trampled over that tablet. Naturally. In order to make yourself subsist, you need to trample over something. Even if you just drank coffee today. You'll be like, well, I didn't trample over anything. Well, first things first, eat food. And the second thing second, yeah, you did. Those coffee beans did not want to be harvested. The only way you can escape this fully is if you just drink water today, because water is just water. Even then, water has life in it. Trampled over those lives, technically. They're in your stomach acid now. But even going before that, just sticking with the food analogy in particular, if you've eaten in like the past week, which you've had to do, I swear, please eat, then you trampled over a living tablet. Life. And now, obviously, let's exclude food, because food is a necessity to life, right? Like, you need to consume things to eat, so let's put that to the side. Let's say, if you didn't trample over human life, you would die. Would you still do it? Let me look at you in your eyes and tell you if it was me or somebody else. Unless it was someone I deeply cared about. I live by the philosophy that violence is bad. You should never take another life. But I ain't going. so like it's an ever evolving, ever eternal problem, right? Where ultimately, despite how hardline stance I am in many of my morals, there are a bunch of ways to make me better. So like, I believe the idea of trampling over the tablets once it's evolved to something living, but not even something living, but something sentient. Because like I said, there's the level of base living where ultimately, in order to sustain yourself, you need to consume another living thing that wanted to sustain itself, but now no longer can because you need to consume it. But even with other sentient creatures, in many ways, I could see my hardline stance against harming other sentient creatures coming like being thrown away the very second my own life is in danger. And we see that Cross, even someone agrees with me in that philosophy, as they say, you finally understand it. You finally understand it? You and your brother are both shallow-minded. Humans like you have trampled on our way of life without even realizing it. Sometimes by standing idly by, sometimes by outright stealing from us. I'm not saying those who have been stolen from have the right to steal from others, but when you've been robbed, the temptation to steal in return lingers very strongly afterwards. You should be prepared for that. So, once again, back to the immigration allegory. We're gonna take a little sidestep away from the religion talk. Yeah. I don't know if you know anything about colonization. You may be like, Pencilman, where are we going? I don't know. This isn't my. I did want to bring this up. Gabe's bringing it up, and I'm not gonna talk about it anywhere else. I don't think so. If you know any, just even a little lick about colonization, there's been a lot of theft of literal people, theft of beliefs, theft of labor, theft of so much kind. And ultimately, what Cross says is true. Obviously in their universe and especially in ours. The idea that people have had their ways of life trampled over by people standing idly by. The bystander effect is a real thing on a small scale and a large scale. Sometimes outright stealing. That just does happen. Cultural appropriation. Theft. Literal cultural appropriation is in like taking things from other people. Theft. Can I say it? I'm kind of scared. You can see I'm dancing around stuff. Slav. Backwards. That's a whole lot of theft that still goes on to this day. It's changed in a lot of ways, but do you know how many people don't even get enough to live and they work like 3 jobs? That's outright theft Two, the idea that life is a subscription service, that you need to pay for a place to live, you need to pay for food, you need to pay for water, you need to pay for all these basic necessities to continue existing. That's kind of insane when you really think about it, but it is true and core to the existence, and it does also define the immigrant existence, especially within other places. And what Cross says here is true, that where many people of many different backgrounds do believe that they are owed some form of retribution for what is taken from them. And I can't entirely disagree, especially depending on what has happened to those people. But naturally we see you could be like, oh, did he just declare war on us? Which I don't think he did, not even in the slightest. He's just like, hey, be prepared if we do. He's essentially just telling you, be wary, which is a good enough reason. But we see that Yuka says, oh, just pretend I didn't hear that, which is fine enough, right? Obviously, she's, 16? Like, she can't think about war. Check, she can't even think 7 months ahead. Okay, that's bad. I can say that. But we see, well, this is perfect timing. Come with me somewhere tomorrow, and you might change your mind about that. And naturally, Cross is like, where? And she says, to get my second opinion. And we see a scan of Yuka's brain with a certain part highlighted. Okotsu Yuka. Numbers. More numbers. Or no, 20... Yeah, this essentially, this is her date of birth. She was born on March 18th, 2070. She's 16 years old now. It is currently 2086. And it is the 2nd of October. And she's at the Kyoto General Medical Center. And the thing that she's getting scanned is her head. And notably, the doctor is explaining to her something devious and diabolical. And Cross is standing by watching. And we see that it said, I couldn't really follow what he was saying. I've never even heard of this illness before. And naturally, Cross, as they walk across a river of stones, very important for later, says, so it's not cancer? I heard that's common among Earthlings. And Yuka admits, I don't know. Is a malignant tumor different from cancer? And I actually don't know that. I think it would just be classified as a brain tumor, which is technically a form of cancer. Like, you can have brain cancer. But I'm not exactly sure. The fact that they don't have a cure for it at this point later on in the future is also very sad, though. But we see that she says, the problem is it's in my brain. I figured those headaches weren't normal, but still. So the reason she's been collapsing, the reason she has low stamina, the reason she's probably not as strong as Tsurugi is because of this. And we find out that Yuka has, let me just read it. Only 6 months to live is pretty harsh. What is this, some low-budget trauma? At least they could do is send some hot guy rushing to my bedside, Which is funny, because could be Cross, or could be Mar. But, naturally, Yuka has a time limit on life. Once again, she's only 16. She will, with the current date, barely reach her 17th birthday. Because her birthday's in March. If she only has 6 months, it's currently October at the time of this narrative. Yeah, she's literally just gonna barely make 17 and perish. Now, this does naturally lead to a question. Maki, all the way back in chapter 1, mentions to Tsurugi that you get stronger through loss. Would this technically complete his heavenly restriction? I don't know. It really depends, because notably, they're only a year apart. Tsurugi is 17 and Yuka is 16. So I think it could be possible that technically Yuka's limiting Tsurugi's heavenly restriction. But it does feel weird because we know Maki's heavenly restriction was limited by Mai existing, an actual biological twin, and twins are bad nature in Jujutsu. So, I don't know. It is weird. I'm not even sure. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if Yuka's death will do anything for Tsurugi. And not even that it'd be a good thing if it did, but just the idea that this is truly, in a way, a meaningless loss. Yuka was truly robbed. And we see that Cross did entertain her, did come along, and is still currently spending time with her. But he's naturally a bit confused, and is like, why didn't you bring me along? And Yuka admits, because I hate going alone, and I don't want to be pitied. Which does make me believe that Tsurugi doesn't know. I don't even think Usami knows, and Mino definitely doesn't know. But we see that Cross says, then I'll be blunt. Even if you had 6 months left, even if you have 6 months left, your heart just died in this moment. No matter what you do, it'll never be moved like it was once before. The things that made you smile, your favorite foods, music, beautiful scenery, none of it will matter. You'll just think, so what? I'm just gonna die anyway. And from there, it's just an endless cycle of throwing away the precious time you have left into a swirling pool of hatred. thinking, why did this have to happen to me? And why not him? Now, him is definitely a big question. Does Cross mean she expects to foist it onto her brother? Does possibly mean him or Moro? I don't know. It is strange as he says, why not him? Not like, why not someone else? Why me and not him? But of course, Cross brings up an interesting point. The idea that knowing that you have a set time limit will take away the joy in life. And this is, once again, as you can tell, we're getting very, very direct, very Themes.txt, very existential here. And we're going to do it in this review too. Many years ago, I had an existential crisis. It was the idea that I knew, one day, at the core of my being, that I was going to not be here anymore. I was going to die. And even in spite of my beliefs, leading to some idea of either a second life or an afterlife of some sort, I don't know what it means to be dead. I didn't even know what it meant to be before alive, and I still don't know. And no one can concretely tell me what comes before or after. And the young me who had that existential crisis was very, very worried. Even though I had no reason to be worried about that. It was just the first time I'd experienced real death at a very young age. And I was just confused. I was horrified. And notably, what I was told at the time wasn't, no, don't worry about it. I was told, in fact, the opposite. I was told to cherish every day, cherish every hour, cherish every minute, cherish every moment. Because nothing is guaranteed. Technically, right now, I'm in relatively good shape. I'd say I'm in not the best shape of my life in terms of like stamina, but like I'm at my physical peak right now. I'm stronger than I've ever been before. I'm in relatively good shape. I have fabs, fake fat ass. Like try. That's like look at the game. I could die at any moment, randomly. I could just go to sleep right now and just not wake up. That's the unspoken horror of life. But very specifically, I remember someone telling me, you can either live with that fact and enjoy life, or you can live with that fact and hate life. And when that was said to me, long ago, I decided to live with that fact and enjoy life. I live with that fact with the understanding that ultimately nothing is permanent, least of all my own life, and that's why I should cherish it more. But of course, that still lives with the contradiction, right? Like I said, that was many years ago. Yuka doesn't have years. She has months. Solid, hard line, deadline. So is it different? Absolutely. Even though I've long since acknowledged the fact that I could die at any moment, doesn't mean I actually worry about that consistently. It's something that exists in the back of my mind. Every time I feel a pang of hunger or thirst, that's my body reminding me we could die. Every time I feel pain, really. But Cross brings up this idea that ultimately, once you're given a hard line set limit, when there's not that possibility of infinity before you, if not a limited infinity, there's not a possibility of time before you, you begin to hate everything. But notably, I think ever since I had the revelation of death, it's actually kind of been the opposite for me, where I've appreciated everything ever more. And I've still lost more people unexpectedly beyond that point. People older than me, people younger than me, and people who were my peers. I've lost them. And once again, the idea of that loss and that impermanence of life. I'm tech, I nearly got in a car crash. Who knows what could happen to me then? I've only, it's weird to say I've only come to appreciate life even more. So I do disagree with Cross in that sense. I think ultimately the fragility and impermanent nature of life, but part of me doesn't want to say it gives life meaning, because that sounds so morbid, right? The idea that if life had no end, nothing would matter. But I don't know. I think life would matter. It would just be different. But at the same time, I don't want to give credit to death for defining life. It just feels, I suppose, everything is defined by what it's not, right? Everything is defined by its opposite. Light is defined by the absence of darkness. Darkness is defined by the absence of light. Like there's that. But we see that Yuka even leans more towards my idea of where that really shouldn't be the way to look at things. As she says, is that how it is with you? And Tsurugi says, or not Tsurugi, wrong character. Cross says, yes, you've had your future stolen from you too, Yuka Okotsu. So, and then naturally Yuka asks, so then, what will you do, Cross? steal even more from those who've been stolen from. Once again, going into the idea that people have lost things, and notably Cross points out the idea of humanity never having to give up anything, so we trampling over others. And this is an interesting aspect of the whole, clear immigration allegory going on here. It's the idea of just because a certain group of people are trampling over another group of people, one way or another, whether it be by the bystander effect or something else, do they deserve to be retaliated against? Because obviously the people who do actually have the power, in this case the equivalent would be the Japanese government and their higher ups and the Jujutsu society as a whole, they will never face the damage of the front lines of people of another species directly fighting unless it's too late. They're always going to send the people who never really wanted to fight, the children, the youth. They will go on to fight wars of powers beyond their understanding, or beyond their reach at least. And that's kind of what Yuka is representing. The idea that ultimately not all humans do trample over others. Not all people intend to trample over others. And it's a rough aspect of it because Cross's response isn't something I can entirely disagree with. As we see, the sheer notion of it makes him angry. Don't compare yourself to us. We suffered a man-made disaster, not some illness or unfortunate accident. Now this raises questions upon questions upon questions. What man-made accident was it? And by man-made, was it Sumerian-made? Or was it made by another species? This is the question. Now, after I did the live reaction, I went and scrolled and looked around a little bit. Like I said, I had to go quickly reread and see where it mentioned that Maru wanted to go to the carnival. I completely couldn't find that. But one thing I saw is a lot of people are theorizing that the World Slash that Sukuna launched off at Gojo somehow reached the Sumerian's planet and sliced it in half. I don't think so. I mean, while that would be crazy, what happened to Maharaga's World Slash then? I don't know. That just feels weird. While it would be cool for Suguna's Slash to still just be traveling off into the void, he also fired multiple World Slashes, and notably they stopped at certain point. I don't think that is the case. But a man-made disaster brings me up to an interesting idea that a friend of mine, a mutual named Babylon over on TikTok, brought up. The idea that a hypothetical merger, while it did not work on Earth, could have happened somewhere else. Especially with the knowledge that cursed energy and its equivalent are accessible to aliens beyond Earth. It would not be shocking to me if another being, maybe a Kenjaku-S being or someone even lesser, managed to pull off a merger, made a literal man-made disaster, and that destroyed their planet. But at the same time, it could be the Sumerians themselves. It's really hard to tell whether or not the Sumerians ran because of their own mistakes or because of mistakes of trusting others. Based on their lack of trust for the humans, though, I like to imagine it was another species, also sentient, that created something that ended up destroying everything, leading to their current refugee situation. And that's why they are the way they are. That's what I would, if I had to hazard a guess. Because I don't think the Sumerians are going to end up being the antagonists. But also at the same time, I think it would be weird to have another group of immigrants also be an antagonist. Once again, just with the whole allegories we're going on with right now. But we see that Yuka says, sure, but you said I had my future stolen from me too. Once again, this is Yuka essentially trying to rationalize with Cross. Reach out to him and be like, dude, we're kind of in the same boat. But we see Yuka admits, maybe you lost your home, but you won't die. I'm gonna die. Once again, playing on the ideas all the way back from earlier in the chapter with the child, right? And the idea that Cross didn't understand why they were tweaking so much because they're still alive. It's not like your mom's dead. Be quiet and sit still. It's the same kind of logic that Yuka's reflecting back on him. What? It's not like you're dead or going to die. You're here. I'm going to die. I will not persist. But we see, and we do see that this does actually manage to break Cross. Cross is already sweating here, but he continues to sweat here. And he says, you think you're going to change my mind because you won in a contest of bad luck? But of course, Yuka's not trying to win anything here outside of maybe Cross's trust and faith. As she says, that's not what I mean. I mean, more like, why jump to conclusions? I can't change my situation. But with time, you can change yours. And that's true, right? Ultimately, the idea of trust. And I do think this, once again, going back, I know you're all like, oh, here goes pencil back to immigration allegories. But this is the common idea, right? That ultimately, humans, different groups of people, can reach common ground as long as they work towards it. And notably, what I do appreciate about Yuka's belief in this is the idea that she says, it's okay to be mad about how unfair it was, and it's okay to not forget it. So tell me what happened to you and your people, because we are not your enemies. And I think that is a very true thing, right? Ultimately, injustice has happened in the past. And I don't even think it's just okay to not forget it. I think it's important to never forget injustice. But I think ultimately, if the opportunity to overcome injustice is risen, one should rise to it and do everything in their power to avoid injustice from happening again. But once again, it's a super complicated topic in our real world, because people who perpetrate injustice are typically people in power, because they have the ability to incorporate injustice on a mass scale, and then they'll never pay for it. They'll never give it up, because why would they? There's no incentive for people up top to do it. It's up to the people on the ground to then possibly become the people up top and do it, or hope that time itself passes and all those in power lose their power. But obviously, power is a cycle. Like we're going on a rabbit hole, but like the fact there are multiple massive events going on all over the world that involve the mass taking of life of people who far from deserve it. Just innocent human beings are being slaughtered in droves because of a difference in opinion. Because one person wants more power, one person wants more money. When ultimately, at the end of the day, we will all die. Like, dare I say, it's really, like, I can't think of a single reason to wipe out massive groups of people ruthlessly, or subjugate massive groups of people. But then again, I'm far too idealistic. And I think that's what Cross believes, ultimately. And you can see I'm saying I'm far too idealistic and dead very, very soft-hearted. But we see that Cross himself says, that's idealistic nonsense. You're standing safely on the opposite shore. You think I can really accept your righteous arguments? And that's the thing, right? Like, it is hard, and I don't even blame Cross for being like this. It's insane to ask those who have been trampled over to reach some common ground by those who have done the trampling. It's like it's the equivalent of someone punching you in the mouth and then them extending their hand afterwards and being like, hey, can we be friends? Sure. I've had many conflicts where ultimately I disagree with someone initially, but then we ended up becoming friends afterwards, but I've never been physically assaulted. My blood or body has never been put on the line for somebody else in that suffering. And then they've asked, and that's never been the case. And anytime anyone has done something truly deviously and diabolically wrong to me, while I am not a vindictive person in nature, I am very much elephant-esque in the sense that I never forget and I will never forgive. Definitely not fully, at least. Even if my opinions will soften eventually, I will never engage with you. So I can't blame Cross, or in this case, people who immigrated from one place to another, for never really being able to forgive. Even if there are these circumstances like Yuka's, even if there are these people who didn't really benefit from the system or don't benefit from the system in the same way that other people do, because it's an impossible ask. People have given up so much, endless things, and you just expect them to roll over, all because it'd be nice if we just were friends. Like, even if that is true, it's so hard to forget that hatred, that hurt in one's heart. It's deep. It's a part of you. It defines you. And I understand it. But we see that Cross is still breaking, right? He understands, no, wait, she's not on the opposite shore anymore. But notably, he's still pushing, as he says, you all keep on going on and on about coexisting. What you really mean is live here on Earth without causing any trouble, right? But for how long do we have to check our behavior for Earthlings? If we have to spend years, decades even, living such a miserable existence, then I will steal! Once again, like I said, Themes.txt. It's gay going. Because it's true. There's so many like, oh yeah, you can come live here. As long as you do all the hard work for like no money at all. As long as you don't cause any trouble. As long as you disappear by sundown. As long as you don't have to worry about your existence. Like, that is absurd. And to wish that upon people is absurd. But it's clear that Yuka doesn't want that kind of existence. It's clear that many don't want that kind of existence. But unfortunately, enough people do want that kind of existence that it's a problem for everybody. And we see that you can actually ask the question. And it truly is the idea of cycles, right? And JJK is definitely a story about cycles. As she asks, and how long will you steal for? And Cross clearly doesn't have a clear answer. He goes, well, but Yuka cuts him off and says, hating people and stealing from them is easy. That's why it becomes an endless cycle. The cycle of hatred, for my Naruto fans out there. Let's put an end to all that, Cross. And this final panel is beautiful symbolism. Cross, the Sumerian, the immigrant. a refugee from another land, across the sea, across the water. And Yuka, the human, the being who wants to connect, still on a stone, but connected to a greater land, connected to a greater space, reaching out, trying to put an end to the cycle of hatred and trying to fix what they once were, what they still shall continue to be as long as they keep down this path. And Yuka attempting to reach her hand out, attempting to help cross that water, how literal his name is in this analogy. It's beautiful, and I do hope they succeed. But overall, if you couldn't tell by how long this is, it's an hour. Gosh, this is like one of my longest videos. That's just a review. Because the chapter's gas. Let's not play these games. Like, the chapter's gas. From the character writing, it's like, obviously Yuka's the hard carry of this chapter, character writing wise, but Cross is another fantastic foil to Yuka. And just once again, the whole, even as I say, oh, you know, there's just gay being very Toby Fox-esque and like just going themes.txt and throwing it at us. It's still executed so well. It's just like, oh no, Undertale has a really basic thematic message that it screams in your face at the very end. What? It's literally the most popular indie game of all time for a reason, because it's still very, very well executed. And that's the same thing with this chapter. Even if it is very straightforward, even if it is very blunt, this chapter just has everything. It has fantastic character work for Yuka. It has fantastic character work for Cross. It doesn't necessarily do much for Maru and Tsurugi and Mino, but that doesn't matter. That's like, they, once again, Cross and Yuka are, if anything, representations of their respective worlds. And I think they work into that very, very well. And even Tsurugi does have this fantastic moment here where he does attempt to reach out only to fall short. And then, of course, we have just the cool, like, hey, do you remember this from the original series stuff with the cursed speech return through Usami and Mahito's implied return or possible return? I guess you could say Mahito was like man-made, so he could possibly be part of the disaster. But regardless, it's so good. It's just so good. If you made all the way to the end of this video, please leave. Can we just talk? Can we just talk? In the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do happen to have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month to get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You can also now become a member to the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include the live reaction to every series I have to review, including the 33-minute live reaction to this very chapter, ad-free variations of all my videos, early access to all my videos, and a name shout out at the end of every single video. Also, I do have a link to my Ko-Fi in the description down below, where you can drop 5 beans for a short video, 20 if it means a long video, or any beans at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. Now, I'd like to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Bag of the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, Brandon Payne, J2MA, Kiyomi, Bura Ura, Alex Kenny, Enzo, Swift Strike, Super Flame Zero, Yuki Ally, Azo2404, Striker Man, Aso8, Grim, Marco 222, Straw, Twisted, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Magic, CCC, Official Popeyes, Ramondo Furen, Crie Panem, Seraphiel, and Dino. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our line art tier patrons: A+A, Kevin Encarnacion, Dread Zoen, Sean, and Midnight Lord 21. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our ink tier members: King RTX and Shrimpo the 4th Shrimp 06. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our digital art tier members: J Warrior and AZ Void. I'd give a final thank you to our colored art tier patrons: Walking Munoz and Walking Munoz.